Hey everyone, this is Louis7, and in this video I want to talk about the Captain class in the Lord of the Rings Online. Importantly, this video and a follow-up one I will be doing on the Captain are a bit experimental, where I'm just trying new things and we'll see how interested viewers are. So I really do appreciate any feedback or ideas anybody has, but I would be excited to expand this set of Captain videos to other classes in the future. But for what is actually going on in these videos, they will be standalone videos first of all, but in large I'm really creating a review of the Captain class in LOTRO in sort of way. I actually plan to also have an open discussion stream on the Captain class as a follow-up to these two videos, where I can do more interactions with other players about the class. And to get moving on for the actual content of each video, this one here is going to be the story of my Captain experience throughout the entirety of LOTRO, and the topic of this story is how the Captain went from one of my favorite to least favorite classes in the game. And the second one will be pretty fun because I will be bringing back the popular Things I Like series with a fresh take on it, with a focus on the Captain class, of course. Alright, so that is a ton of background information, but I really did think it was important with getting this set of videos started right. One more important thing is, of course, all of the content in these videos is going to be based on my own personal experience and my own opinion of the class. What I really hope with this series is that some viewers can also give their input on the topics by commenting on the videos and that thing, and also that these videos are going to be enjoyable to watch. But because my channel is generally education oriented, I do hope that maybe some people learn some things about the class to help them out as well. But anyway, after all that, I think it is time to tell the story of my Captain experience in the Lord of the Rings Online. The first section of this video will be on some background information on why I like the Captain class to begin with and how it appealed to me from the start. Then we will shift to the events that led to it no longer being one of my favorite classes, and finally I will end on my latest Captain experience with an emphasis on feedback from some notes I wrote down while leveling that Captain. Again, if anyone does have feedback on this more story-based type video content, please do let me know if you want to see more of it. But anyway, to start off, at the time of preparing this video, I started a new Captain on Anor to do some low to mid level content and joined my Ken's progression group. That experience actually inspired this video and even the set of videos I'm doing on the Captain now, with the idea to basically talk about my overall thoughts on the Captain class and just share it with everybody. And just to give some reference, today, like right now, I think I rank the Captain about in the middle of the pack with the classes, and for my more recent playtime I do consider it more enjoyable than some of my least favorite classes, even if it still is no longer one of my favorites. But moving on, with the Captain at its core, it is a buff-focused melee class in LOTRO. They provide a lot of support, and due to their buffing power and group content, they are going to be weaker on their own. Then with that, the class is topped off with some fancy animations and dazzling effects to go with it. Now, I came from a gaming background where support was just another word for healer. When I started LOTRO, I learned this was not the case with classes such as Loremaster and Burglar, and then even Captain here. So this was a really unique gameplay experience to me, not just in LOTRO but across MMOs in general. And after getting familiar with the game, I liked the idea of being a Captain and the buffing aspect from it, especially really the idea of buffing making you and your group more powerful over time and just building that up throughout combat. So that is the short version of why I was initially drawn to liking the Captain, or at least the idea of it. So I first made a Captain that was on Arkenstone way back in the day. Siege of Mirkwood time was when I made that, and this Captain, I didn't end up enjoying it too much. It was actually a middle of the pack type class to me, and basically I had to be in the mood for it. And I was generally playing my other characters, and again this was Siege of Mirkwood and Rise of Isengard time, so I was still starting out with LOTRO. And another thing is, I actually don't have much specific here to share with this part of the story because, well, it was a long time ago, and I only got my Captain to about level 30, so I don't really remember all that was going on then with my experience with the Captain, just general things. But after that, actually a long while after that, later around update 18, a bit before Mordor, I was really enjoying the Captain. I was building my Captain up by running instances and doing a lot of in-game group content and even doing featured instances, a ton of those, and I was just having a lot of fun with that. And that was around the time I also made a list of my top 3 classes, and Captain was number 3. So that is the background on kind of the big picture things that led up to the Captain being one of my favorite classes. But I want to actually talk about some of the more specific details to give you the more complete story and full experience of what I was experiencing. So I was really enjoying group content, as I mentioned. Playing as DPS was actually my least favorite spec I found out. I did enjoy tanking on the captain, but healing, the blue line, was the most fun for me from like a raw gameplay perspective. Another thing to highlight is I really like the animations and ability effects with that spec. Although most animations were pretty basic, I admit, there were also some really neat and thematic ones, but what I really felt like was an area where the class design really shined was in the ability effects. A lot of it just really fits in with the class fantasy and makes it more exciting to play a captain and group content. Alright, so that is with all on why I like the captain to begin with, and with even a lot of that still being true today for me, I want to talk about the events that led to me no longer playing my captains, which is really how it started to become lower in my class ranking, because of course I wasn't playing it, so I didn't rank it as high as some other classes. But after Mordor was released, that expansion, I was having to go through the game solo again, and on my high level captain, this was not the most fun or exciting experience. I honestly wasn't enjoying Mordor questing in general, not just on the captain, all that much. I could make a whole video on why I wasn't enjoying Mordor, but I'll leave that for another time, and the point here is I wasn't having as much fun on my main captain, even if it was one of my first characters to be going through the Mordor content, which was the initial draw of that at least was exciting at the time. So for me, leveling was feeling slow, and actually extra slow because of the whole Mordor thing, and in general, I just didn't have much motivation to go through it all on my captain. So even though Mordor wasn't the most fun, I thought I could still enjoy the class. So along with Mordor, the High Elf race was released, and now captains used to only be available to race a man, but then High Elves could be captains. So I started a new captain as a High Elf and even made it a series here on my channel. I streamed that. But eventually my playtime on that character tapered off as well. I think he was getting to mid-20s level. So with all of that, I just eventually stopped playing my captains altogether, and it wasn't really an intentional thing that I stopped playing them, it just kind of slowly happened over time. And I was really favoring other things in the game. I was playing other classes and all those sorts of things. So on that note, another reason I was playing other classes specifically and not the captain was they were seeing changes and revamps and updates and new gameplay and just a lot of new exciting things to other classes, and the captain never really got worked on. So of course I was playing these more updated classes and testing them out, and if you all have seen my content, I was making videos on all these other classes and all their changes and all that sort of stuff. But again, the captain didn't get it, so that was a little bit disappointing that the class never got touched on. But that is the story of why I wasn't playing my captains as much, and as I mentioned, since I wasn't playing them, I also just didn't rate them as high as before. Moving on to part 3 with my new chapter and my captain experience, I want to talk about the legendary servers first because they were released a couple years ago. With that, I was excited to make a character of every class and play around with them a bit and level them and do all that sort of fun stuff that you do as an altaholic. Well, the legendary servers had some issues, I think, with progressing way too fast, and I actually never got around to making a captain there. It just kind of remained on my to-do list for that server, and things were progressing so fast I had to really get an experience, not even a complete experience, but a somewhat complete experience. I had to do all these other things. So that was really unfortunate. It was just super speedy with their releases. But a long while after that, a bit earlier this year, I finally did get around to making another captain. And this is my Captain Onanor, the one you see in the background gameplay here. And with this one, I was hoping to test out the class again and get a sort of fresh perspective on it after having not played any captains recently. And I had played a lot of other classes a lot more frequently, whereas just more familiar with how some of the other classes worked out and how it felt playing them and all that sort of gameplay stuff. So this captain was pretty exciting. And after a few levels in, I decided to just jot down some notes from my gameplay, which ultimately again inspired this video and really this mini-series, if you could call it that. So I also do want to mention that all of the things I have talked about on why I like the captain was still true with this character to start. I didn't go from already liking things about the captain, like their animations and ability effects, to disliking those same things. So here, for this part of the story, I will focus on things I noticed that I had while leveling the new captain. So some of it will just be general feedback, but some of it will also be specific issues I have. I think this will give more reason to why the captain is no longer one of my favorite classes. But I will, at the end of this, focus on some more positive things from my leveling experience to really end this on a good note. So again, just to note with this part, I will be continuing the story-based format, but to get started here, one of the very first things I noticed on my captain was it felt slow to play, and like there was a bit of delay between skills going off. This became especially true in group content way later on, but this delay could sometimes cause me to press like other buttons too fast and use the wrong skills. Of course, this happening once in the blue moon wouldn't really be a big issue, but it was just happening kind of way too frequently, and it just made it frustrating overall was really the problem. And this was something that was always true with the captains, even when they were one of my favorite classes. But it is a contributing reason to why I never really considered them even better, was because the animations and skill times didn't always line up, so it felt like I should be able to use stuff, and there was just a delay, and there also was a technical animation delay. And with this new Captain Honor, I was actually going to try to get past this as I leveled and even try to mostly ignore it, even though it did ultimately continue to be frustrating to me. And one thing I actually want to point out is there was a somewhat recent update where they actually increased or decreased the animation delay with a lot of the captain skills. So part of this had been fixed or made better, but even on this new Captain Honor again, this was after that update and I still noticed it, so it still was a little bit frustrating. There's just some sort of desync or something that bothers me with the skill time and animations and some delay there. And ultimately, I'm going on so long about it here because it is probably the most frustrating experience on the captain for me. But to move on from that, another thing I did notice was inconsistency in skill damage as I leveled up. And of course, I noticed overall lower damage at higher levels as I leveled up. In general, my damage got lower. But after all of this, I understood the captain was going to be low damage. Don't get me wrong that my expectations were to do a lot of damage from the get-go. But at very low levels, I actually did a lot of damage. That was super unexpected. And in fact, I was killing things faster than my hunter friend who I leveled up with for a bit. So again, that was surprising, and it really falsely set solo DPS expectations too high. I think that's especially true for maybe a newer player or even a returning player. Because of that, they would expect captains to do high damage because they do high damage at low levels. But anyway, the other inconsistency I mentioned was skill damage. And some skills were really strong at low level, but they quickly, like very sharply dropped off in their damage around level 20 to 30 or so. So for example, Rout and Cry would one-shot mobs around level 10. But as I leveled, it started to do smaller and smaller fractions of enemy morale. And another one was Cutting Attack's bleed damage. That was actually able to kill off a mob in just a few of the bleed ticks, but again, just a few levels later, it couldn't even kill a mob in its full duration. So I was a returning captain player at the time, but this is, again, even true for new players, or maybe even especially so. But it set my expectations for bleed damage and a bleed theme overall with the captains way too high. And the whole part I'm talking about here isn't really something that would drastically make the class like lower in my rankings, but I still wanted to share it because it certainly didn't help my experience on the new captain going forward. And really just talking about it gives a complete experience, the complete story of my captain, if you will. Anyway, still at generally low level at the time, my captain was around level 20, and that is when I started to do some leveling group content. One thing I noticed here was my Herald companion felt a lot less useful in a group. The 1% buff it gave and little bit of damage it dealt on its own, it just didn't feel like it was contributing much at all. And that might be okay, but it did get me thinking about captain pets and like on my high level captain, how I just had it out to give a little passive buff to my group. And I don't think, again, this is really a complaint I have here. I just think the captain as a class could be more appealing to me if Heralds maybe just had a little bit more to them. But they certainly don't take away from the experience again. I will also say the Archer was nice to get around level 26, I think it was, I want to say. But even its damage fell off and kept feeling weaker and weaker as I leveled up as well. So moving on as time went on and I leveled up a bit, I got new skills and the gameplay experience was more fully fleshed out. As I got close to level 50 and was still fully forming out the ideas for this video, I decided to review the Captain gameplay on my Captain a bit more with each spec. So I actually played my high-level Captain from Argenstone a little bit just to remind myself about the gameplay on each line and how it felt. So switching between the two characters, I picked up on some things that I felt like was almost missing from the Captain's gameplay experience. This is super weird, and I will kind of leave it at the gameplay left something to be desired. And this was especially true for red and yellow line. And I will admit this is a highly subjective area and an already subjective video. Of course, it's like my own story. But it was just my experience on the Captains bouncing between the low and high levels ones. It just felt like there was something in the gameplay that was missing, and again, super hard to explain. One thing that I might actually think with it is the blue line has a skill called Gallant Display. This is a pretty basic skill that just has a 5-second cooldown, and you can use it every 5 seconds, and it's pretty much a standalone skill that does tier up as you use it. But it is one of my favorite skills in the entirety of LOTRO. But even setting that aside, just having some sort of skill like that, I feel like would make the red and yellow line, as far as their gameplay, more cohesive and just more enjoyable. Maybe a skill like that. But anyway, again, I will leave that there for this video, that it is a super odd thing. It just felt like something was missing from that. But those are actually the 4 kind of big things I noted down while leveling. For my personal taste in the Captain, I think some improvements there could have made my leveling experience better. But before we get into some of my group content notes, I do want to mention some of the other more little things that I noticed while leveling that do help prevent the Captain from being a definite top class of mine. As I always say, little things add up, and this is definitely true here. But in general, I got thinking about Captain equipment and how they're pushed towards the idea of using horns. And I should actually backtrack here. So it actually starts with halberds with the equipment, and I don't like the halberd animations, particularly on the high elf. For the race of man, I don't think they're particularly great, but I haven't played with them enough to really say in this video. But for the high elf, it felt odd that I hated the halberd animations, and they were the only class that can use halberds. So I thought they felt very slow, and that, again, the animations just fell off. But really the way I would put it is I thought my character never ever picked up a halberd in his life and just had no idea how to use one. He didn't know the pointy end is where you're supposed to hit the enemy. So that was a little bit off-putting with halberds, and something just super weird. But again, that is actually what got me thinking about equipment in general. And with the idea of horns, they're kind of pushed for the Captain experience. They use horns. Well, actually, you have one buff skill, and you can also summon fellows with horns. But I thought maybe because the idea of horns are at least pushed towards the Captain, they could be utilized a little bit more in the Captain gameplay. Perhaps for some fun variety, it almost felt like the horns were missing in the actual gameplay experience. So I thought maybe some animations and ability effects it would be neat if they actually utilized horns. And then the final random note I had as far as equipment goes was that shields could be pushed more. So I never felt like I should be using a shield, even though for tanking especially, but even healing, a shield and a one-handed weapon is actually most optimal. So to me, it actually felt like I was downgrading myself to use a shield, even though that definitely wasn't the reality. It was an upgrade. But again, just to recap kind of this section wasn't really meant to be particularly positive or negative. And these were just some random notes I did have for my leveling experience on my Captain on Anor, really about equipment mainly. And I think it just fills out the complete story of my newest Captain. So now I want to move on to my group experience on Anor, and I was running level 50 in-game instances with the Angmar ones and the Rift of Ner'zghashu and Helagrod and all that good stuff. So I was really excited to reach endgame, at least endgame on our level progression group on my Captain. And I was running through with a group as kind of a flexible support class that the Captain is. So for our particular raid composition, we were low on tanks, and I had previously actually been tanking all of our Angmar runs on my Beorning. So I expected to do a fair amount of tanking here on the new Captain. And I was actually hoping to eventually be able to play all specs, of course, and was especially excited to try out healing when the group composition worked for that. But starting off as a tanking captain, I unfortunately did notice some of the issues with animation delays and general slowness. So now the captain, I will say, isn't the best AoE tank. This is where I noticed it most, like first going in the instances. But with me having the extra slow feeling made it more frustrating to deal with AoE like regular trash mob type fights. And comparing to my other tanking characters, of course the Beorning, they're a great AoE tank as far as aggro goes. And on the captain you could expect it to be easier to let aggro slip maybe on a mob or two and just have a little bit tougher time getting the AoE aggro. And I know they're tanking their force taunts were even more recently reworked, but I haven't played my captain with that experience. Again, this is the story going back to my Captain Honor from a couple months ago. But anyway, getting back on track here, dealing with that slow feeling like there was just some sort of gap, some sort of pause, the animation delays really, that is what was more frustrating, especially in AoE situations compared to single target where it didn't matter as much. Anyway, this could, if I was doing difficult content, the Angmar instances aren't super difficult, especially for a level 50 group even. It wasn't really much of an issue, but it could have been annoying to my group that I was like letting aggro slip, and it was more due to slowness rather than actual mechanics with the gameplay of the captain. So really getting back on track here. With all that said, however, I did enjoy tanking much more than I did leveling. So even though it might not sound like it here, it was still an upgrade for my captain experience. It was really fun to be in a group and do that again. I just wanted to highlight that more frustrating part of it. So after a few runs, we did have some new players join the kin and some new characters around the Angmar level, so we had more options with our progression group and more options for tanking actually. And of course this was exciting to me because I was able to heal a couple runs on my captain this meant. At first it was a little bit scary, I will say, because a lot of captain healing is passive and like pulse AoE type healing. And if you have like one particular member of your group, say the tank, get into a lot of trouble with damage, the captain isn't great at emergency healing. You have one single target heal that you can use, and it's more of a slowly built heal over time and not much of an immediate heal. All that's going to be wrapped into your fellowship or pulsing AoE type heals. But again, as far as that goes, the content was easy, so ultimately I had no issue at all keeping up actually on the healing output. So that was all good news to me, and I was able to keep up as the only healer. And really I was having more fun with it. So healing was more fun to tanking, even though there is actually no difference in the animation speeds and animation delay and all the such. So even though that was actually the same, it wasn't something I focused on as much with the blue line. So one thing I think with tanking is I had to do more things in like a specific order, so it was a little bit frustrating when I would have issues because the skills I'd like stop there doing nothing as a character and have to wait what felt like a couple seconds. In reality we're talking milliseconds type stuff, but it's very noticeable when you're playing the game to where it does feel like a couple seconds. But those type of delays on the tanking spec where you have to do something, have to get things off, have to use your force taunts, have to manage mobs and all that sort of stuff, even defenses and cooldowns, it's just much more noticeable to me on the yellow line than the blue line. The blue line, I'm too busy paying attention really to all these neat ability effects and animations, and even looking at my fellowship's morale, their debuffs, making sure I don't need to remove stuff like that, and just a lot of other things where I almost don't even have time to really pay attention to animation delays, as odd as that sounds. So to kind of summarize here, I think it really comes down to what I personally experienced between the two lines, but I also enjoy what I enjoy out of the captain has more to do with the blue line and all that sort of stuff, and the pros of playing the blue line spec outweigh the broader cons of the class to me. I don't think this is something that would be true for all captain players, especially because at endgame on highest tiers of difficulty the blue line is actually just too weak to be utilized. But yeah, if you remember back towards the beginning of this video, I mentioned that blue line used to be one of my favorite, or used to be my favorite spec on the captain, and that was because of the gameplay and some of the animations and effects that go along with it as well. And I definitely found that to be true on the new captain, as you can probably tell. So that is where my current captain experience ends. So that story covers from all the way to the beginning of, well, my experience in LOTRO when I started off actually relatively indifferent towards the class, to the high points during the level 105 cap before Mordor, to a bit after Mordor, all the way through Minas Morgul, including the legendary server launch when I wasn't playing the captain. And it ended with a new chapter on my latest captain on Anor that I have relatively recently started running group content again. And I know this video has been a little bit delayed since I started this story, of course, but with him I'm actually still mostly enjoying the blue line, and we will really see where the story goes from here. I am excited to continue playing the captain, and I will be excited in the future to start comparing my experience on it to other classes. At the end here, I hope you all enjoyed this different style video. As far as like getting back to YouTube again, this is something I'm testing out, so I'm really interested in feedback on this, and as I mentioned, just any thoughts in general people have on this experimental set of videos. Again, I am considering, just to recap, doing this type of video for each class. I think it would be really fun to do, so please comment if you want to hear about my story with another particular class, and I would be excited to get started on that. Anyway, we can go ahead and get finished with this video. So again, I hope you all enjoyed and maybe learned something about the captain from my story. And if you did, please consider liking and subscribing for more, or becoming a channel member to support the content. And thanks for watching, everyone.